Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. There has been a huge case out of Michigan. You guys probably already heard about it. It involves Jennifer Crumbley, the mother of Ethan Crumbley. It deals with a horrific school shooting that occurred in Oxford, Michigan back on November 30th of 2021. It resulted in 4 young people losing their lives, another 7 being wounded. After 11 hours of deliberation starting Monday morning, a jury has returned verdicts to all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter of guilty. This marks the first time in the history of the United States that any parent has actually been held criminally responsible for the acts of their children engaging in a mass shooting. And of course, since it was the first time that they've been charged, it's also the first time that we've ever seen a parent convicted. It has a lot of people talking, has a lot of people telling you out here in the YouTuberverse how you need to think about it. We're going to try to stay true to our mission at Washington Gun Law today. We're going to try to keep it right down the middle. We're not going to tell you how to think, but we are going to give you all the stuff to think about. So today, let's do a little soul searching and let's talk about unpacking the Jennifer Crumbley case and what it means to you. Okay, dateline February 6, 2024. A jury in Michigan has returned 4 guilty verdicts against Jennifer Crumbley on 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. This deals with a horrific school shooting that took place in 2021, committed at the hands of Miss Crumbley's son, Ethan, at Oxford High School. Now, I had an opportunity to actually go through much of the trial transcripts, and then more importantly, what I actually did is I pulled up the Michigan jury instructions. Because I know there's a lot of people out here in various social media platforms that are sitting there telling you this is a great verdict, this is a wonderful day for justice, or this is a horrific verdict, and this is a horrible day for Second Amendment rights. I'm not going to tell you guys how to think. I am going to give you all the stuff to think about. And rather than telling you guys what you should think, I want to hear from all of you. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an acceptable set of facts. I'm going to give you the actual jury instructions that would have been given to that jury, and you tell me whether Jennifer Crumbley should have been found guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Okay, these are the facts as elicited in trial. I'm going to summarize them. Understand that if you're basing this solely on what I'm saying, you might want to do a little bit more digging, but I will try to give you an objective thumbnail sketch of what the prosecutor's evidence was. On November 26th of 2021, James Crumbley, as well as Jennifer Crumbley, buy their 15-year-old son, Ethan, an early Christmas present, a Sig Sauer 9mm handgun. I'm not going to get into that. I will tell you that I have one boy that's 19. I have one boy that's 14. I haven't bought either one of them handguns, and they're incredibly responsible young men. Okay, on November 27th, the very next day, Jennifer Crumbley and Ethan Crumbley go to the range and they shoot, and one could presume then that Jennifer would be the person who would have taught Ethan how to use that firearm unless he had some previous knowledge. Okay, just a couple days later, November 29th, a teacher finds Ethan searching for ammunition on his phone during class, and he is confronted about that. On November 30th, the very next day, James and Jennifer Crumbley are called into school because they are still concerned about the fact that he was searching out for ammunition on his phone during class, but they've also found multiple drawings in which Ethan is drawing images that appear that he might be prone to committing violent acts. There is a meeting at the school that day. The school encourages the parents to take Ethan home, but they do not mandate it. The parents claim that they can't take Ethan home that day because they both have to go to work, although Mrs. Crumbley's testimony was kind of shredded apart in that particular subject. The school does not demand that Ethan go home that day, nor does anybody from the school bother to check Ethan's backpack. Unfortunately, Ethan had brought that Sig Sauer 9mm handgun to school that day, and a couple hours after his parents departed the school, engaged in this horrific act of violence in which 4 students lost their lives. Another 7 were seriously wounded. Now, evidence also came out that Mrs. Crumbley was involved in multiple extramarital affairs and spending a large majority of her time burning the candle at multiple ends. Mr. Crumbley was working several jobs and rarely, if ever, home, and so it appears that Ethan was not under much parental supervision. Evidence also came out that Ethan had attempted to talk to his parents about his ongoing mental health issues, but his parents were not really paying any attention to it. Now, this all comes from journals that were found on a search of the Crumbley home, authored by Ethan. And so around the time of this incident, the prosecutor was able to paint a picture of a father who was either working all sorts of odd jobs or drinking a little too much, while his wife was out with multiple other sexual partners doing her thing, and nobody appeared to be paying any attention to Ethan or his ongoing struggles. Now, during the trial of Mrs. Crumbley, there was considerable effort spent to try to figure out where the firearm was actually stored. Mrs. Crumbley said on multiple occasions that that was Mr. Crumbley's job. Now, here's the reality of the situation, is there was a couple other handguns that were found in a safe at the Crumbley home. It was a little Derringer and I believe a Kel-Tec. The safe still had its original 000 code, so I don't know if the Crumbleys were keeping the firearm there. There was also evidence that came out that they might have been moving the firearm around day to day. Presumably, they'd be doing that to hide the firearm from Ethan. Regardless of how they attempted to store it, I think it's safe to assume it was not securely stored because, well, we know Ethan got his hands on it and brought it to school. Okay, so that's the operative facts. Now, I could go through all the Michigan law with you, but why don't you just put yourself in the shoes of the jury? Mrs. Crumbley was charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The jury in Michigan would have been instructed on the to convict instruction. And the to convict instruction is always the most important jury instruction because that tells the jury what you have to find in order to find the defendant guilty of the offense. The Michigan model jury instruction on this is jury instruction 16.10. It reads as follows. 1. The defendant is charged with the crime of involuntary manslaughter. To prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant caused the death of, name the deceased here, that is, the victim died as a result of the defendant's acts. Second, in doing the act that caused the victim's death, the defendant acted in a grossly negligent manner. So under the Michigan jury instructions, if the acts of the defendant, which were committed in a grossly negligent way, and that could be acts or failure to act, contributed to the death, is the cause of the death of the deceased, and in this case there are 4 separate deceased people, then the defendant is to be found guilty. Now, their acts have to be grossly negligent. Does Michigan law define grossly negligent? Yes, it does. The jury instruction is Michigan Criminal Jury Instruction 16.18, which reads, gross negligence means more than carelessness. It means willfully disregarding the results to others that might follow from an act or failure to act. In order to find that the defendant was grossly negligent, you must find each of the following 3 things beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so now we have extra instructions. We got to find these things before we can find that Mrs. Crumbley acted in a grossly negligent fashion. Remember, she has to have acted in a grossly negligent fashion in order to be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The state would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, first, that the defendant knew of the danger to another. That is, she knew there was a situation that required her to take ordinary care to avoid injuring another. Second, that the defendant could have avoided injuring another by using ordinary care. Third, that the defendant failed to use ordinary care to prevent injuring another when, to a reasonable person, it must have been apparent that the result was likely to be serious injury. So under the jury instructions, and if you were the juror, you would have to first find that Mrs. Crumbley acted in a grossly negligent fashion, that there was some obvious risk that she failed to act upon, and that failure to act resulted in personal injury. If you believe she's grossly negligent, then yes, the standard is there if you believe that that gross negligence was a cause in fact of the death, to find her guilty of the involuntary manslaughter. But there's a couple other ways you could skin this cat. You may believe that Mrs. Crumbley, albeit maybe not a particularly good parent, that the parenting did not rise to the level of gross negligence. If she's not grossly negligent, she can't be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Or even if you find that she was grossly negligent, you may not find that that gross negligence was in fact the cause, in fact, of the injury and death here. I ask all of you to tell me, what do you think now that you understand what the alleged facts were and what the jury was instructed? Bottom line is this is a huge case. This is a seminal moment in American jurisprudence because for the first time ever, a parent has been found to be criminally liable for the acts of their children when it involves a school shooting. Listen, we'll go ahead and link up some of the stories down below, so if you want to geek out on it for yourself, you can do so. We will also link up the Michigan pattern jury instructions down there so you can see for yourself how the jury was instructed. If you got any other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information, it's also down there in the description box. Now, in the meantime, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.